New Year's Eve turned out to be cloudless, but the pale winter sun did not warm the frosty air at all. Whitehead's building was metal, with spray foam insulation clinging to thin sheets of corrugated metal, but the cold seeps up through the bare concrete floor. Anthony Whitehead, director of operations, trembled as he crossed the floor, the loud clatter and whine of various machines making thinking almost impossible. He looked around and caught the eye of the shop supervisor, Brent Collier. Anthony Whitehead was a tall man with pale blonde hair, a square face, and deep brown eyes. His shoulders were square, his chest muscular, and his waist narrow from years of working on oil rigs. Although his father could pay for his education, Anthony declared that he would earn his own living and let his father go to hell. Anthony now spent 3 mornings a week at Arthur Porter's gym to stay in shape. Arthur Porter trained Garland Louviere, a Cajun star who was poised to become the next heavyweight boxing champion of the world. Garland's last fight was against Xavier Smith, a seasoned heavyweight. Overconfident, Garland entered the ring. He didn't come out anymore. Instead, his body was strapped to a stretcher, covered with a white sheet, and carried out of the ring. Arthur Porter trained everyone as if they could become the next Garland Louviere. "Yes, sir?" Brent asked. Anthony tensed his face. Brent Collier had a special way of saying, "Yes, sir," as if he were saying, "Your ass, sir." Brent Collier was the type of person who smiles in your face and then slashes all your tires and pours sugar into your gas tank when you're not looking. At 3:30, send everyone home, tell them Happy New Year, and we'll see you on the 2nd, okay? Said Anthony. "Yes, sir," Brent said with a new accent. "They will be paid until 5:30. No one loses their watch," Anthony clarified. "As soon as the last one checks in, please put the timesheets at my door, okay? Thank you." "Yes, sir," Brent said again. "Smart guy," Anthony said, walking away from the now grinning supervisor. "Anthony, your father is dead. That's how this nightmare began." Anthony Marcus Whitehead received a phone call at 6:42 in the morning. Painfully hungover, he pushed aside 4 or 5 empty beer cans and knocked back 2 of them to grab the ringing, dancing cell phone. Cheyenne, his wife, cursed loudly and rolled over. Anthony also cursed when he saw beer leaking from overturned cans, staining the carpet. "Anthony, your father is dead," said Susan Whitehead, his mother. Finally, thought Anthony. Marcus suddenly and acrimonious divorced Susan, his wife, to marry ash blonde Natasha Jetchenbach. 2 years after marrying a young woman, Marcus suffered a disabling stroke. He barely held on for another 3 years. Finally, Anthony thought again. Well, Mom, this is not surprising, right? Anthony said out loud. "Crap. What time is it now? Tell them to call back," Cheyenne complained loudly. Anthony gave the complaining woman a loud slap on the buttock. As she turned to scream at him, Anthony grabbed her face with his right hand and squeezed. Cheyenne's blue eyes sparkled furiously, but she held back her response. Susan continued to give Anthony information about the funeral and visitation. Anthony asked his mother if she called the others in their family. Susan agreed that she had not called. He was the first person she called. Anthony said goodbye and ended the call. "My father died, okay? My father died, and you sit here and make noise," Anthony shouted at his angry wife. "Well, excuse me, how did I know about this?" Cheyenne shouted in response. Anthony got out of bed and went down the stairs. Turning on the light in the kitchen, Anthony saw several hundred cockroaches scatter. He smelled a putrid odor that he couldn't identify. "Oh my God, I can't believe it," Anthony muttered darkly as he began cleaning the kitchen of their home. "What are you doing?" Cheyenne asked, scratching one of her surgically enhanced breasts. "What do you think I'm doing, Cheyenne? I know you've never seen anyone in your family do this, but you know what cleaning looks like, huh?" Anthony answered sharply. "Oh, Anthony," Cheyenne snapped, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Wine? Wine? God, Cheyenne. It's not even 7 in the morning," Anthony said. "Hangover drink," Cheyenne replied sharply. Anthony saw that the kitchen waste bin wouldn't be able to hold all the waste, So he went to the garage and found a garden bag. As he carried the bag to the front door, Cheyenne decided she needed a little more hangover. Upon returning from the curb, Anthony began brewing coffee. An inspection of the refrigerator revealed several containers and boxes from various restaurants, but nothing that could be used for breakfast. Another gardening bag was filled from the fridge and freezer. A tightly rolled flyer from the Courtyard Mall served as a temporary insect trap. After Anthony drank a mug of bitter coffee, which for some reason had a burnt taste, he entered the living room. In the living room, it was clear that the mahogany coffee table and matching coffee tables were covered in numerous round marks from beer cans, none of which had been placed on a stand to protect the expensive furniture. There were a few mysterious scratches. Anthony could not determine the source of these strange marks. The entire time Anthony sweated and strained to clean the house, his head ached non-stop. He wanted a drink, he wanted a can or four of beer. He wanted to open the fifth bottle of gin he saw on the mahogany shelf. "What do you want for lunch?" Cheyenne asked as she walked out of the kitchen, another glass of wine in hand. "You cook?" asked Anthony. "Yes, of course. Are you drunk?" Cheyenne laughed. "Now I'll call Hop Kim's, let them prepare it." "Yeah, well, hot and sour soup and twice cooked pork," Anthony decided, looking around the living room and not knowing where to start. "Okay, he said it would be ready in 20 minutes, Cheyenne said. "Will you go in your own car?" Anthony asked, deciding to try the furniture polish and paper towel on the coffee table. Cheyenne said, raising her glass of wine. "Damn, Cheyenne, busy, okay, never mind." "Never important," said Anthony, seeing that the polish had no effect on the surface of the table. After lunch, Cheyenne put more than half of her food into the now nearly empty refrigerator. Anthony ran the vacuum cleaner over the carpet in their living room. Cheyenne switched from wine to vodka and watched Anthony, an amused expression on his face. "Crap." Anthony finally spat out and gave up trying. He decided to clean himself up and wandered up the stairs. As he walked, he noticed how dirty the steps looked. Apparently, they had not been swept or washed for a long time. The bathroom light flickered and then illuminated the bathroom with a bright light. The lamp above the mirror once had 3 frosted balls. Now only one light bulb had a frosted cap, softening the lighting. The other 2 bulbs were unprotected, unfiltered, and the light stung his tired eyes. His face was swollen, and there were bags under his eyes. The face was covered with thick light brown stubble. His blonde hair was disheveled and unkempt. "What are you doing now? Look how beautiful you are," Cheyenne taunted, finding Anthony's actions funny. Anthony looked at his wife's reflection in the mirror. He knew why he started dating a rude, loud girl. Her breasts were huge. Her blonde hair was dyed. Anthony actually liked her dark roots. It turned him on. And most importantly, Cheyenne angered Marcus Whitehead. Cheyenne Allison Frick went up against Marcus Whitehead. The fear of pregnancy drove Marcus Whitehead so crazy that Marcus threatened to kill the blonde girl. Susan didn't like Cheyenne either, but she tried to persuade with gentle persuasion rather than threats. The most Susan could do was get Anthony to agree to a prenuptial agreement. Cheyenne refused to sign the document. But Anthony, on the verge of finishing his master's degree in engineering, knowing that his monthly salary from the St. Anne parish government was more than Cheyenne and her mother's annual income per day, stood his ground. "Put your John Hancock on the dotted line, Miss Frick, or you can keep the engagement ring as a parting gift," Anthony stated calmly. After uttering a series of curses, Cheyenne nevertheless scribbled her signature on the indicated line. Casting death glares at Anthony's lawyer, Cheyenne initialized each page of the 7-page document and then scribbled her signature on the last page. "Well, what about her things, huh?" asked Uncle Tommy. "Okay, I'll play your game." Anthony looked at the bloated man. "Which things? What does she bring to this marriage? Is the marriage ending? For some reason? She can keep her breasts. She can keep her tattoos. What else does she have?" Now, 14 years after their wedding, Anthony wondered what made him marry Cheyenne Allison Frick. He looked at the dirty mirror in the bright light of the bathroom and wondered why he had allowed himself to be convinced to buy this monstrosity of a house. And he wondered when and how he turned into the swollen, unkempt man he saw in the dirty mirror. Luckily, the water heater worked. Anthony used a damp cloth to soften his 3 or 4 day-old stubble. Then he began to shave. Cheyenne got tired of watching his manipulations and went in search of more alcohol. The entire time he shaved, Anthony's headache throbbing relentlessly. God, how do blind people shave? Anthony wondered out loud, wanting to close his eyes from the bright light. After the shower, Anthony found a shirt. After putting on the shirt, Anthony received another shock. The shirt didn't fit his chubby body. He barely managed to fasten it around his stomach. It was the same with his best suit. "We're almost out of beer," Cheyenne said as he walked down the stairs. And Mom said she was really sorry to hear about your dad." "Tell her it's very noble of her," said Anthony. "Cheyenne, it's almost 4 o'clock. When do you usually take a shower?" "Don't know." "Whenever I want," Cheyenne shrugged, handing him the jar. "I don't want any more," Anthony said. "More than what? Did you have it upstairs?" Cheyenne asked. "No, Cheyenne. I don't want any more. I don't want this crap. God, look around you, huh? It was a $200,000 house. We'd be damn happy to get $100,000 for it the way it is now. And look at me, huh? On our wedding day, I weighed 171. I'm afraid to step on the scale to see how much I weigh now," Anthony said sharply. "I still weigh 124, Cheyenne boasted, pointing at her body. "Your ass too," Anthony said, looking around the living room. "I do," Cheyenne assured shrilly. "No more. No more to everything," Anthony said. "I hope you don't think this is about me," Cheyenne said, her eyes widening. "Of course not," Anthony said, heading into the garage. "I expect you to do whatever you want, whenever you want, how you want." Anthony went to his mother. Jimmy and Lisa Whitehead, his sister and brother, were already at Susan's house. After knocking once, Anthony entered the house and found Susan, Lisa, and Jimmy drinking coffee at the breakfast table. As usual, Susan sat between Jimmy and Lisa. "I hope there's another cup," Anthony said, hugging his sister and then his mother. "Yeah," Susan agreed. "Call your sisters," Lisa demanded. "They won't come." "Oh, okay," Anthony said. "Damn, it was a spontaneous decision for me." No, they say they won't go to the funeral," Jimmy clarified. "I'll talk to them," Anthony promised. "I need you to say the obituary," Susan said quietly. "What?" Anthony laughed bitterly. "What do you expect me to say? That he was a bastard who didn't know how to make concessions, what was always his way or not at all. That he only did something when it benefited him. He was a good father," his ex-wife defended. "Yes, Mom, he was a wonderful father," Anthony thought sarcastically. "Mom, honestly, I don't think I can handle it well," Anthony admitted. "I'll still stay, thank God." "Headache?" Jimmy guessed as Anthony swallowed 3 aspirin tablets with a sip of coffee. "No, Jimmy, hemorrhoids," Anthony replied sarcastically. "So stop being a pain in my ass." "Anthony," Susan said reproachfully. Before leaving his mother's house, Anthony agreed to persuade Cindy and Barbara to come to the funeral. He also agreed to deliver the obituary. He congratulated Jimmy on his 10th anniversary and asked Lisa how his niece Gracie was doing. "He gets a B for the semester," Lisa said proudly. "Do you have money?" Cheyenne asked when Anthony returned home. "A couple of bucks." "For what?" "Lionel will come. We'll bring about 300 Bahama Black," Cheyenne said. "Well, Cheyenne, that's a problem," Anthony replied. "You see, I don't want this crap in my house anymore. And since you want her, I guess you'll have to find a way to get those 300 bucks, but I won't pay a penny." "What?" Cheyenne sighed in shock. "Not sure what you mean by what, but I'll say it again. I don't want this in my home. I do not need it." "I won't pay for it," Anthony said. "Moreover, I'm seriously thinking about throwing out all the alcohol, too." "Oh no, you wouldn't dare," Cheyenne barked. "However, Cheyenne had somehow found $300 by the time Lionel Turner arrived. The man looked disgusted as he slowly counted the crumpled bills. Anthony almost took the glass, almost poured himself some gin, but he didn't. Instead, he busied himself with other things, trying to write his father's obituary. But while Cheyenne was sleeping, Anthony found her wallet and took out all her credit and debit cards. He did the same with his wallet, leaving himself with only one credit card. The cards were locked in a small safe in their home office, along with any documents associated with their cards. Bank statements were also locked, inaccessible to Cheyenne. The next morning, while Cheyenne slept, Anthony got dressed and headed to Dusty's country kitchen for a hearty breakfast. The headache did not go away, and his headache with renewed vigor. His hands shook terribly while he drank his coffee. "Where the hell are my cards?" Cheyenne screamed into her cell phone. "What cards?" "Cheyenne, you don't have any cards," Anthony replied calmly. He was restless inside. Internally, he wanted to avoid this conflict with his wife. "Maps. Cards. The ones that were in my wallet, asshole," Cheyenne screamed. "Really? Then why wasn't your name on them?" asked Anthony, and stopped screaming. "My head hurts enough as it is, you know." He ended the call just as she started shouting back. Apparently, it took her a few seconds to notice that she was alone. Anthony let the call go to voicemail. As he listened to the first millisecond of her voicemail, Anthony wondered where Cheyenne got the strength to scream like that. His head hurt too much to speak louder than a whisper. Because Cheyenne Whitehead's name was not listed on the account, Mitch Dufer of First Union Bank called Anthony Whitehead when Cheyenne contacted First Union for a new debit card. "Mr. Dufer, Cheyenne Whitehead can get a card for any account she already has at your bank," Anthony said. "Thank you, Mr. Whitehead," Mitch replied. "Any account she already has with your bank, Mr. Dufer," Anthony repeated. "Any account I have? She has no right to it and will not have access to it. If Cheyenne Allison Frick Whitehead gets one dime of my money, I'll find another bank to do business with. Are you clear, Mr. Dufer?" "Absolutely, Mr. Whitehead," Mitch agreed and ended the conversation. After a moment, Anthony let his wife's call go to voicemail again. She left a 1-minute 48-second tirade on his voicemail. Anthony lowered the volume and listened to the enraged message. He looked around and realized he was driving past Whitehead Generators, a large corrugated steel building that made generators, substations, and equipment that bore his father's name, his own name. He turned into a large parking lot and stopped the car. "Asshole. You think you can? I'll divorce your fucking ass, you hear?" Cheyenne continued to scream. "Oh, thank you, Jesus," Anthony said out loud. "Yes, Cheyenne, yes, that's the first sensible thing you said. Nick Fowler, his lawyer, the man who wrote the prenuptial agreement, has died." Anthony felt horror. He didn't remember when Mr. Cruz Fowler died. He vaguely remembered receiving a letter from the law firm Ferguson, Benoit, Fowler, Jones about his cases, but could not remember the name of the lawyer who had taken over Nick Fowler's cases and clients. Ferguson, Benoit, Fowler, Jones. If you know the number of the person you want to reach, enter it now, then press the pound key. For information about our catalog, click 311. For hours and directions, press 312. For general mailbox, press 313. To contact the operator, press 0, the man said in a soft voice. Anthony pressed 311 and listened to the answering machine read out the names. He didn't recognize any of them, so he decided that he would go home and look for the letter in his office. Returning home turned out to be a bad idea. Cheyenne was still in an alcoholic delirium, and she had support. Her mother and her mother's current boyfriend, Uncle Bootsy, were there too. For some reason, Uncle Bootsy decided that he needed to teach Anthony about Cheyenne's rights as his wife in financial matters. Anthony began recording the confrontation on his cell phone. "Sir, get out of the way," Anthony said. "This is my home. I will not tolerate you coming into my home and interfering in my affairs." "No, no, son, you see," Uncle Bootsy pointed a bony finger at Anthony's chest. "Sir, don't touch me again," Anthony warned. The old man didn't listen and poked his finger into Anthony's chest again. The man smiled as Anthony hit him. "I was in the army, boy," Uncle Bootsy laughed, easily parrying Anthony's clumsy blow. Anthony's foot shot forward and hit Uncle Bootsy square in the groin. He raised his knee and crushed Uncle Bootsy's nose. "Mrs. Frick, you and your boyfriend need to leave my house." "Now," Anthony ordered the woman who was screaming, and Cheyenne suddenly fell silent. Anthony locked himself in his home office and began looking for a letter from Ferguson, Benoit, Fowler, Jones. He noticed that his desk had been opened and looked at the safe. The heavy safe had been moved, but without the key, Cheyenne had little chance of opening it. "Carter Fulilove," Anthony said when he found the letter. The email included Carter's email address, and Anthony logged into his computer. Immediately, there was a knock on his office door. "The police are here, fool," Cheyenne shouted through the door. "They want to talk to you." "Yeah, that was fast," Anthony muttered. "And without sirens." "The rabbit hit me there, son," Uncle Bootsy muttered, his face still covered in blood. The old man's eyes widened, and he gasped as Anthony hit him in the solar plexus. Groaning, Uncle Bootsy collapsed again onto the heavily stained carpet. "Nice try, Cheyenne," Anthony chuckled. "Again, Mrs. Frick, you and the month-long loser here need to leave my house." "My house, too," Cheyenne squealed. "He has a pacemaker." Cheyenne's mother screamed, trying to resuscitate Uncle Bootsy. "Then call an ambulance." "He's not going to get any better lying here on the floor," Anthony said calmly, and closed and locked his office door again. When Anthony heard the sirens, he opened the door. He chuckled as Cheyenne realized that 2 police cars had also arrived with the ambulance. Apparently, when she told the 911 operator that her husband had beaten her mother's boyfriend, the 911 operator thought it wise to send the police along with an ambulance. Cheyenne frantically tried to hide all traces of illegal substances and other paraphernalia from the living room. The kitchen, being the closest room, became her target as she rushed back and forth. "Right here," Anthony said, pointing. "And officer, you might want to take a look in the refrigerator." "You damn bastard," Cheyenne screamed, rushing at Anthony. Anthony allowed himself to be handcuffed and placed in a police car. The officer apologized, but since the 911 call claimed Anthony started the initial confrontation, he had no choice but to arrest Anthony. Cheyenne, however, resisted arrest much more actively. The ambulance loaded the stretcher, and Donna Frick left in the ambulance with John Bootsy Bordelon. "Here are your keys, sir," the officer's partner said, handing the keys to Anthony. "The house is locked. Press this button on the key fob, and the alarm will make 3 sounds. "So it's installed," Anthony agreed. "Thank you." "Yes, sir," the officer said, placing the keys in Anthony's shirt pocket. Anthony looked around at the crowd of neighbors gathered on the opposite side of the street. He smiled and nodded to his neighbors. Anthony speculated that he and Cheyenne had lived in this house for several years, but he could not name any of the curious faces. "Hey, do me a favor, will you?" Anthony said as he watched Cheyenne struggle to get her into the second police car. "Yes, sir?" asked the first officer. "Hey, don't put us in the same cell, okay?" Anthony smiled. "Let's see what we can do." The first officer smiled broadly. "We won't promise," the second officer laughed. "Usually guys give us the most trouble, huh?" The first officer said to his partner, turning on the car. "Ferguson, Benoit, Fowler, Jones, if you know the number of the subscriber you want to reach, please enter it now, then press the pound key," the voice said in a friendly manner. Anthony typed 419 and the pound key. A moment later, Carter Fulilove's voice came over the line, inviting Anthony to leave a message. "Sir, your wife wants to know who her lawyer is." The policewoman asked Anthony. "I have no idea." "I didn't know she had a lawyer," Anthony smiled. "You're enjoying it, sir," said the first arresting officer. Carter Fulilove was a handsome African-American with a fish-like grip. His face showed no emotion as Anthony told him what had happened. He just nodded when Anthony stated that he would also use Carter for his divorce. "First things first," the lawyer finally said. At first, let's have your preliminary hearing. Then, let's worry about everything else. Damn bastard. Anthony. Fuck no, you can't tell me to shut up. Anthony, I need a lawyer, get your damn hands off me. Cheyenne yelled at Anthony and the bailiff as he and Carter entered the St. Anne Parish Courthouse. Participant number 2. Carter asked, showing a sense of humor he hadn't shown before. Yes, guess what? Do we have lovely farewell gifts for her? Anthony jokes. Zelda, tell her she won, Carter said, pointing to the spot. Let me talk to Hightower. Let's see what he has. Carter and David Hightower, Assistant District Attorney for St. Anne Parish, leaned their heads toward each other, whispered to each other, and then walked away. David looked at the documents, looked at Anthony, nodded to the civil engineer. They didn't tell me you worked for St. Anne, Carter accused, turning back to Anthony. Sorry, I swear, I thought I said it, Anthony replied. Anyway, since he knows where you work, he doesn't think you're likely to run away, Carter said. Allows you to testify. I guess we're going for not guilty and you're out of here. Depends. I don't even know what I'm accused of, Anthony admitted. Domestic violence, assault, and battery, Carter said. Then yes, innocent, Anthony agreed. Damn it, Anthony Marcus Whitehead, let me out of here, Cheyenne screamed as Judge Linda Newberg slammed her gavel, releasing Anthony after David Hightower didn't ask for bail. Keep screaming, Anthony chuckled as Judge Newberg ordered the bailiff to escort the female inmate out of the courtroom. Anthony went home, shaved and showered, and found some comfortable pants and a decent shirt. He then called Carter's office. Okay, I passed the preliminary hearing. Let's get on with the rest, Anthony said. Don't waste time, huh? Carter asked. My father died yesterday. No, 2 days ago, Mr. Fullylove, Anthony continued. I'm really sorry for your loss, Carter said. It sounded almost sincere. And I have no idea what, if anything, I will inherit, Anthony continued. Knowing my father, it could be a box of dirty diapers and a note asking him to kiss his ass. HM? Carter asked. Not the best relationship, Anthony admitted. But if it's even $1, I want to make sure Cheyenne Allison Frick Whitehead doesn't get a dime from this. So, do we file for divorce before the will is read? She will have no rights to anything. And we have a prenuptial agreement here, Carter said. And thanks to her behavior in court this morning, we know where she can be found to serve the summons, Anthony chuckled. The visitation to farewell Marcus Whitehead was quiet. Anthony tried to squeeze his body into the black suit and found that he couldn't. Abdul sold him a new suit and a fresh white shirt to go with it. Cindy and Barbara, the Whitehead family's twins, appeared at the farewell ceremony. Anthony explained to both that they had not come for their father. Rather, their appearance was to please their mother. Anthony's obituary spoke largely of the empire his father built and his few philanthropic endeavors. He also shared a slightly funny anecdote with business acquaintances and several friends and family members who were in attendance. I don't even remember what stupid thing I did. I mean, really, out of the thousands and thousands of stupid things I've done. Try to remember one specific incident, eh? Anyway, I did something stupid, and my dad just sighed and said to me, there is no trick to loving a good child. But damn, you gotta know all the tricks to love a bad guy, him. I wonder who he was talking about, huh? Well, Dad, I'm sure God is using every trick in the book to love you now, Anthony concluded. Lord, big brother, Lisa said in a whisper. It was so sweet that I almost believed you meant it. Bite me off, Anthony chuckled and hugged his sister. Somehow, Cheyenne was able to turn her stint in the St. Anne Parish jail into addiction treatment at DeGard's chemical ward. The only reason Anthony knew about this was because Cheyenne was covered through his insurance through St. Anne Parish. Carter shrugged, unable to do anything since Cheyenne could not be extradited. CDU could not release the names of any of its patients and could not tell Carter Fullylove whether Cheyenne Allison Frick Whitehead was a patient at their facility, even though he knew she was there because of his client's insurance. Whether Carter Fullylove was a lawyer or not made no difference to the institution since the divorce in question was considered a civil matter. Carter shrugged again and contacted Anthony Whitehead. "She's either incredibly smart or incredibly lucky," Carter told Anthony seriously. "Incredibly manipulative, incredibly cunning, incredibly selfish," Anthony sighed. "The reading of the will is scheduled for tomorrow." "Okay." The reading of the will was a bit of a surprise for the Whitehead clan, even though Marcus turned his back on them to woo the now-married Natasha Jetchenbach, even marrying the younger woman when her divorce from Dwight Dowsett became final. He did not turn his back on his ex-wife or his children and grandchildren in his will. "I suggest we call a board meeting immediately," Susan said seriously as they sat in the conference room of the lawyer's office. Susan's appointment as chief executive officer of Whitehead Generators was approved fairly easily. There was only one no to Anthony's appointment as coup, and that was Anthony himself. "Hey, in case you forgot, am I currently working? Officially employed in St. Anne Parish?" said Anthony. 42,000 a year? Or 500,000 a year? Even if you went to ULD, you should understand that," Jimmy said. "Anthony, you protect my money, Gracie's money, as well as yours," Lisa persuaded him. "Damn, okay, I'll resign on Monday," Anthony sighed in response to everyone. "And it's blackmail, using Gracie against me." On Monday morning, after Anthony left his boss's office, his insurance company contacted him immediately after he left. Anthony shook his head and called Carter. "Cheyenne was discharged without permission, Anthony told the man. Carter contacted Cass Jackson and gave the procedural officer the address of Mrs. Donna Frick and the address of Anthony and Cheyenne Whitehead. The man smiled and assured Carter that he would get down to business. Yo, he said as Donna opened the door to her trailer. "Cass Jackson is on the line. Hey, Mom, Lionel told me to say hi to Cheyenne. You know what I mean?" "Lionel," Cheyenne said from behind Donna. "Damn, that was fast. Just called him, what, 5 minutes ago? You know how it happens. I was nearby and your boyfriend called me." Cass smiled widely. "Okay, here's 200, Cheyenne said, holding out 2 brand new $100 bills. "Hey, no, wait, take them back. We'll need them," Cass said, losing his smile and accent. "Mrs. Terse Whitehead, you have been served with a summons." "I what?" Cheyenne asked, shocked when Cass pushed a manila folder into her hands. "You know what it is," Cass laughed. "Have a nice day, everyone, do you hear?" Anthony didn't have to guess whether Cheyenne had been notified. She called his cell phone, sent him several threatening text messages, then called his work phone and screamed at him when he answered the phone. "Cheyenne, I'm at work," Anthony said calmly. Anthony didn't feel calm inside. He didn't like confrontation. "Do you remember? I supported you when your husband left, and I took over your responsibilities here while you went to court trying to get alimony from that scoundrel," Anthony reminded Anna quietly, turning to Anna. "You're right," said Anne after a long silence. "You really did it." A place appeared near that shopping center. "Acapulco Grand," Anthony said. "Do you want to go there for lunch?" "I cannot. Brianna needs braces," Anne answered. "I'll treat you, Anne," said Anthony. At lunch, Anthony listened to his colleague talk about what the future held for him. A lonely existence, even with 3 children crammed into a 2-room apartment. An existence where you have to choose between braces for Brianna and a new jacket to replace the one that's falling apart. When you have to tell children that their desire to go to a trampoline park or go karting on their birthday is simply impossible. "I love them. This is my life, you know. But God, sometimes," Anne sighed heavily as the waitress assured them that their lunch would be ready soon. "What do you do for fun?" asked Anthony. "Putting pins into my ex-husband's voodoo doll," Anne answered. "I wanted children," Anthony said. "My niece Gracie? God, what a beautiful girl she is. It breaks my heart every time I think about. Either way, I would love to have my own little Gracie, my own Brianna, or Shannon. His own little Ricky, even if he likes football. If you want them, they're yours," Anne joked. "Enchilada without rice?" The waitress interrupted them. "Here," Anthony said. but it never seemed like the right time. Cheyenne needed this, she wanted that. Now, looking back, I understand if we had a child. The child would have to compete with his mother for everything he wanted. Thank you for lunch, Anne said as they left the restaurant. Thank you for listening, Anthony replied, opening the car door for her. Damn, I did more talking than you, Anne reminded him. About? It was? I didn't listen, Anthony jokes. Over the next week, Cheyenne alternated between asking Anthony to pay off his debt to Nathan Garcia and asking him to come home. His offer to pay the debt in exchange for her agreeing to the terms of the divorce was met with outcries. Do you know why divorce is so expensive? Anthony asked Anne when he hung up after another call from Cheyenne. Why? She asked, not looking up from the documentation for the proposed butterfly park. Because it's worth it, Anthony sighed. I'll have meatless chili for dinner today. No, not because we are vegans. It's just that it's 3 days until payday, said Anne. Sounds delicious, Anthony replied. Kiss my ass, Whitehead, Anne snapped. It sounds terrible because it is terrible. And now his last day of work was coming to an end. Some colleagues stopped by his office and wished him good luck. Some pretended to measure his office, pretended to move there before his car left its assigned parking space. Hey, DeFranco, Anthony said. I did a little research, and one of these ranch things is for a single mom and her 2 girls and a boy. It's only a couple $100 for a whole week, so there you go. What? What did you do? Anne screamed when Anthony handed her an envelope with 4 tickets. The location was in Oakleaf, Texas. We need to use them before the end of the year, Anthony said. Bye. Anthony spent his first day at Whitehead Generators walking around the facility, getting to know the employees and observing how they worked. His head ached and his ears were ringing before an hour had passed. Leaving work, his head pounding and his ears ringing, Anthony noticed a low cinder block building. The banner announced that Arthur Porter's gym was now open. The ringing in his ears did not prevent Anthony from hearing Arthur Porter. The man was almost deaf. He didn't speak. He was yelling. With his teeth chattering, Arthur sized up Anthony, shook his head in disgust, and signed him up for a year's gym membership. Carter informed Anthony that Cheyenne required counseling. Anthony actually laughed but agreed to go. Who knows, said Anthony. Yes, let's try consultations. Okay, Carter said. If she pays for it, Anthony added. Okay, Carter smiled now. What the hell should I pay? My beauty, Cheyenne yelled into the phone. Cheyenne, do you know another way to talk? Damn, my head already hurts from all the noise at work, Anthony sighed. And I don't care how you pay for consultations. But if that's what you want, you have to pay for this. Don't you want to work on our marriage? Cheyenne asked with pity. Honestly, no, Anthony admitted. Somehow, Cheyenne found a way to pay for her first consultation session with Dr. Sylvia Hooperstein. In the waiting room, Anthony nodded politely to Cheyenne and continued filling out the form. In the employer column, he wrote no. In the insurance column, he again wrote no. In the column additional source of income, he wrote obscenity. Marnie Vogel, Dr. Hooperstein's receptionist, smiled when Anthony handed her the clipboard. The attractive, middle-aged woman immediately began entering Anthony's information into the computer. It's disgusting, exclaimed the woman, whose eyes flashed with anger after a moment. Anthony grinned at the woman. She was still angry when Cheyenne handed her the information she had scribbled on her forms. Dr. Hooperstein will see you now, Marnie said, pointing to the door. Ladies first, Anthony said, the first words he had spoken to Cheyenne since they entered the small waiting room. 10 minutes into the session, Anthony no longer believed that Dr. Sylvia Hooperstein could help him and Cheyenne repair their relationship. Within 10 minutes, he was tired of the woman's one-sided opinions, her fortune cookie-style advice. Anthony? Sylvia asked after Cheyenne had taken almost 35 minutes of the 50-minute session. Yes, Anthony answered politely. How do you feel about what your wife said? Asked Sylvia. Oh, well, it was nice, Anthony replied. What exactly was pleasant? Sylvia was surprised at his unexpected answer. Well, it was nice to hear that she can talk and not just scream like she usually does, Anthony said. After the third session, Sylvia recommended several individual sessions in addition to family counseling. Oh God, no, Anthony objected. Well, Anthony, it's obvious that you have some anger towards women, and Dr. Hooperstein began reproachfully. I love my mother. She's as graceful, elegant a woman as you could ever meet, Anthony said. She has a huge stick up her ass, Cheyenne said mockingly. And my sister Lisa? We're best friends, Anthony continued, ignoring Cheyenne. Another bitch with a stick in her ass. I mean, it's a gold-plated stick, but... Cheyenne turned to Dr. Hooperstein. And then there's my niece Gracie, Anthony continued. His perfect little angel, Cheyenne said mockingly. Anthony stood up and left the doctor's office. He ignored Marnie as he left the building. Again, since Cheyenne was the one asking for these sessions, she had to pay for them. Did I hear you call Dr. Hooperstein a charlatan? Carter laughed on the phone. So much for medical confidentiality, Anthony laughed in response. Neither Carter nor Anthony knew how Cheyenne or her lawyer managed to arrange it, but they ended up in Judge Ken Theriault's office. Cheyenne sat with a satisfied smile on her face as her lawyer made a plea to force Anthony to return for counseling and pay for it. Anyone except that charlatan, Sylvia Hooperstein, Anthony objected. And since my client has already completed 3 sessions, no more than 5 additional sessions, Carter asked. Is Dr. Patiz Kevorkian available? Anthony asked out loud. He died a few years ago, I'm afraid. Judge Theriault chuckled. 8 sessions with a licensed counselor that both parties can reasonably agree to. And Mr. Burns Whitehead, since you are officially employed, you must pay at least 65% of these expenses. Dr. Jackie Trahan was an attractive woman in her early 30s. She had a firm handshake and looked Anthony and Cheyenne in the eyes as she addressed them. She listened intently, taking notes on a small pad, interrupting to clarify certain statements. She gave Cheyenne 25 minutes, then Anthony 25 minutes. She also admonished Cheyenne for interrupting Anthony. Fine. Next week, Anthony, we'll talk about your goals. What do you hope to get out of this? Cheyenne, same thing. What do you hope to get out of this? Said Jackie. What? Are you an idiot? Cheyenne said in surprise, her eyes widening. I want our marriage back. Jackie suppressed a grin. Behind Cheyenne, Anthony shook his head in denial. Okay, this is your main goal. Think about your secondary goal, tertiary goal, Jackie said. I like her, Anthony commented as he and Cheyenne left the woman's office. Oh, of course you like her, Cheyenne said. She seduced you the whole session, she accused. What? Anthony was surprised, stopping at his car. She seduced you the entire session while I was trying to talk, Cheyenne repeated. Well, next time I'll take a look, Anthony promised. But there was no next time. A surprise visit by a court official to Cheyenne's home revealed illegal substances lying in plain sight on the coffee table. John Bootsy Bordelon was unhappy with his trial. He had already been replaced in Allison's bed. He only made his situation worse by threatening Anthony Whitehead in front of the judge, prosecutor, and bailiff. Keep talking, loser, Anthony chuckled. This, of course, provoked more threats, more promises of revenge. What could have been a simple fine and probation turned into 40 months in a medium-security prison. John did not make it to the facility, however. He died of a massive heart attack 2 days after the trial. Anthony continued to experience difficulties at work at Whitehead Generators. Many employees did not accept it. He was a stranger who suddenly appeared and became their boss. Production began to fall, slowly at first. But in recent weeks, production has virtually ground to a halt. Meetings with the heads of each department did not bring results. Each executive also did not accept Anthony's sudden appearance. Most of them started at the bottom and worked their way up in their departments. They believed that Anthony should have started at the bottom and worked his way up through the ranks. Susan and Lisa couldn't help. They were, of course, concerned, but they had no applicable knowledge of what to do in such a situation. "Mom, I'm going to do something very, very drastic," Anthony finally said after receiving an angry call from an overseas company. "Do it," Susan said. "Do it," Lisa agreed. The next morning, there were 60 boxes of tornado donuts on the table. Each employee was invited to enjoy them, take one, 6, or a dozen of the delicious treats. Large kettles boiled dark, rich coffee. There were also 2-gallon jugs of milk, whole and skim. Anthony poured himself a large cup of whole milk and dipped his vanilla tornado donut into it. "Okay, okay," Anthony said as the staff chatted, ate, and laughed. "All," called Heather Alcoyne, production manager. "Mr. Whitehead wants to say something." "All, quiet," Brent Collier shouted. "Thank you," Anthony said, drinking his milk and throwing the glass into a large trash can. He pointed to a large graph. It had colored stripes extending outwards. "The red one shows last year's numbers as of this date," Anthony said. "Not bad, right?" He let the whispers of agreement fall silent. Then he pointed to the red stripe. "You know they were good. You all got some pretty hefty bonuses in your Christmas stockings, right?" said Anthony. They weren't Christmas," Brent began. "Nonsense. Pure nonsense," Anthony interrupted him sharply. "They were issued 2 days before Christmas. These were Christmas bonuses. Does anyone hate that it's called a Christmas bonus? You can return this bonus to Whitehead Generators. Anyone want them back? No? Then I hope you all enjoyed these Christmas bonuses. So, as I was saying before political correctness came in, the numbers last year? Good. Numbers this year? Terrible." Anthony pointed to the blue stripe. The blue stripe was almost 3/4 the length of the red stripe. "Can anyone tell me why the blue band numbers are terrible?" "Anyone?" asked Anthony. The silence was broken only by someone coughing. Anthony looked at the employees, at the managers. They all looked back at him. "What changed? What has changed between last year and this year? Has demand fallen? According to our sales, this is a big hard no. Has product availability changed? Looking at our stock, that's a big fat no. Has the trucking industry stopped sending trucks to our loading docks? No. Have shipments to our customers stopped? No. So what's changed?" asked Anthony. There was silence again. Some employees looked down at the hard concrete floor. "The only thing that has changed is the death of my father, and last I heard, he wasn't coming down here to help unload the trucks. He did not manage the parts manufacturing process. He did not switch cylinders. He didn't come down here for assembly. He didn't load the trucks. The man sat in his office and made sure that parts were ordered, that bills were paid, that employees received salaries, and it's still going on. So what has changed? How exactly could Marcus Whitehead's death affect our production?" Anthony continued. After a long silence, Anthony removed the bar graph and folded it. He then threw it into the trash can. "So that's what's going to change," Anthony said. "Or are the numbers returning to the level they should have been? 6 weeks from today, 6 weeks later." He looked at his watch. 7:43, or each of you. Without exception, every last one of you will be unemployed. Have questions? No? Go to work, Anthony finished, turned around and walked up the metal steps to the office. Less than 4 weeks later, 27 days after the donut breakfast, Lisa reported to the board that production was back to normal. In fact, they are likely to exceed last year's numbers. "I suggest giving them a bonus," Jimmy suggested. "I suggest not," Anthony replied sharply. "What?" Lisa was surprised, amazed at her brother's harshness. "Bonus? For doing what they are supposed to do. If I hadn't gone down there and confronted them head-on and let them know they were just days away from unemployment, we'd still be talking about how bad the numbers were and trying to figure out how to improve them," Anthony said. "Then no bonuses. I'm not even sure I want to give them Christmas bonuses." "There will be Christmas bonuses," said Susan. "Even if I have to give up my share, our employees will receive their Christmas bonuses." "I thought we shouldn't call them Christmas," Jimmy began. "I am a Christian. Are you Christian? We are celebrating Christmas. It's a damn Christmas bonus. Each of them, who is offended by the word Christmas, has every right to refuse to receive their Christmas bonus. But I'll bet your life that neither of them will mind, Anthony replied sharply. You're betting on my life, huh? Not on yours. Mine, Jimmy grinned. Are there any other new cases? Susan finally interrupted the brotherly squabble.
Yeah, there's a new case about why Anthony is such a big old jerk, Jimmy said.
Then I propose adjourning the meeting, said Lisa. I support, Anthony agreed. Anthony continued to pay utilities and home insurance even as he looked for a new place to live. At first, he thought about moving closer to the plant, but he didn't like the areas around Pin Oak. It was even worse in Algae. Many of the houses were built 50 or 60 years ago, and many looked as if they had not been painted in as many years. Susan's home was in a gated community next to Hardington Acres Golf Club. Anthony had a tag on his car's rear-view mirror, and if he forgot or lost the tag, he also knew Susan's security code and could enter the code into the gate. Cheyenne didn't have a tag. Cheyenne had no code. Cheyenne was still behind bars, but they weren't going to keep her there forever. Carmen Davis was an attractive middle-aged woman. She had a firm handshake and a friendly, relaxed style. She also listened to her clients rather than trying to force them to listen to herself. This alone put her above the last two realtors Anthony worked with. Hardington, you usually have to wait for someone to die before you can get a house in this area, Carmen mused. But there is one on Pennington. Would you like to see? Let's go, Anthony said. The house was 3 stories high with a deep chocolate brown brick exterior and honey brown wood surrounds. Even before seeing the interior, Anthony decided he wanted this house. The garage was located at the back, separate from the main house, had 3 spaces for cars, and had a guest apartment above it. The garage was built from the same brick as the house, and the garage door was made from the same honey brown wood. Don't worry, Carmen said, getting out of the car. The house has been taken off the market. What? But there's a sign from Gold Standard right there, Anthony pointed out. No, I decided that I want this handsome man for myself, said Carmen. You rarely see garage doors like this. Well, since we're here, let's take a look at your new home, Miss Davis, Anthony chuckled. The first floor had a great hall, a room clearly intended to be a library with honey-brown bookshelves built into 3 walls and a large fireplace. The kitchen was spacious and had plenty of space to work. The dining room is a little small, but... Carmen shrugged. The second floor contained 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The east side of the floor had 2 bedrooms separated by a shared bathroom, and the west side had the same configuration. Sure, one of these could be turned into a home office, Carmen suggested. Or I could shoot myself, Anthony said. Miss Davis. Call me Carmen, okay? Suggested Carmen. Carmen, I come home to get away from work. Why should I bring it home with me? Asked Anthony. Fine. So, no home office, Carmen said. These are really big bedrooms. Ready to see the 3rd floor? There were only 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor, but each of them was an apartment. Each bedroom had a fireplace, a large bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, an enclosed shower with a marble bench and 4 shower heads, and a vanity with 2 sinks. Each bedroom also had a large bay window with an upholstered bench. One window faced east. The window in the other apartments faced west. Like I said, it's a shame this house is off the market, Carmen said admiringly, looking at the closet. You could park a truck here, Anthony said, looking into the closet. Of course, my ex. Surely she would find a way to fill it and end up without a place. My girls are not like that, Carmen smiled. But I have a feeling that my granddaughter is Carmi. She's going to be a little princess, and princesses need a lot of clothes, don't they? How much did they ask? How much did they ask for it? Anthony said as they walked down the stairs. You know, before you got it for yourself. 475, Carmen answered. Offer them 490, Anthony said. We'll need a 1% deposit, Carmen said. Of course, Davis Real Estate, Anthony asked, and used his phone to translate. Anthony was munching on a serving of ribs at Cowboy's BBQ when Carmen sent him a message. The proposal was accepted. He wiped his hands, but still got sauce on his phone when he told her to arrange for the deal to close as soon as possible. Carter, Anthony, and Cheyenne's lawyer were back in Judge Theriault's office. Following Carter's petition and minimal token resistance from Cheyenne's lawyer, Judge Theriault agreed that because Mrs. Whitehead could not attend the counseling sessions, the order for 8 mandatory sessions was vacated. "That's why I pay you big money," Anthony exclaimed. With the lifting of the consultation order, Carter continued, "The issue remains regarding Mr. Toos Whitehead's petition for divorce. Mrs. Whitehead does not agree with this petition," Cheyenne's lawyer pleaded. Judge Theriault contacted the St. Anne Parish Clerk of Court, who confirmed that Mrs. Whitehead's upcoming trial would take place in 4 months. With this information, Judge Theriault refused to proceed with the divorce petition. "Your Honor," Carter said. "It's okay," Anthony sighed. "Really? The only reason to get a divorce is to get married again. And I have a feeling it will be a long time before I make that mistake again. Yeah, get rid of the one crazy woman who resists divorce until the end, finally decide to hell with it. We're just making the lawyers rich, so give it all up. Then, just as you know, you're in Burns doing a little shopping, you see." This stunning redhead, the cutest little redhead girl with her says, "Hi, mister, what are you doing? And now you're in love, and you just need to be with this woman," Carter said. I have a feeling you're not making this up," Anthony said. He smiled wider as Carter raised his left hand, showing his wedding ring. Carter also smiled as he admitted that he is the coach of his stepdaughter's soccer team. "Oh, that's, good. Maybe one day she'll want to play a real sport," Anthony suggested. "Yeah, I'd love to see your pale ass trying to keep up with a bunch of 7-year-olds who all think they're the next David Beckham," Carter smiled. Cheyenne was fined $10,000 and placed on probation for 3 years with a stern warning that if she failed the test again, she would spend 3 years in a medium-security prison. She no longer had Anthony's phone number, so she called Whitehead Generators. Courtney Louviere, the personal assistant Marcus had trained, contacted Anthony to tell him that his wife was on line 3. "Hey, Cheyenne, what a nasty surprise," Anthony said. "Called your old office. That ugly thing, DeGard or something, said you weren't there anymore," Cheyenne snapped. "DeFranco," Anthony said. "What?" Cheyenne asked. "Her name is DeFranco. Anne DeFranco," Anthony said. "And, Cheyenne, where have you been?" "What? I was in jail, moron," Cheyenne squealed. "I took over my father's business, remember?" Anthony continued, drowning out her indignant muttering. "That happened before you went back to prison." "How am I supposed to remember all this nonsense?" Cheyenne asked. "And, what's all this nonsense? We don't have to go to counseling anymore. You've been unavailable. But hey, now that you're free, we can move forward with the divorce," Anthony said. "Really, why?" Cheyenne asked, her voice shaking. Anthony listened to her cry for a moment. It really hurt, listening to her cry. He felt they were real. Her tears were sincere. She didn't try to manipulate him, didn't try to get her way. "Cheyenne, why? Why in God's name do you want to stay married?" asked Anthony. "What? What are you saying? I love you," Cheyenne sobbed. "That's enough. Just stop and think about it for a minute, Cheyenne," Anthony said. "Honestly, I have no doubt that you can love me. But honestly, you don't love me at all." "It's not like that," Cheyenne sobbed. "What? What exactly do you like about me, Cheyenne? Because all I remember is endless nagging. Constant nagging, endless complaining. Please, Cheyenne, please just sign the papers. Just give me a divorce." "You don't even want to try?" Cheyenne sobbed. "Please?" "Cheyenne, please just listen," Anthony sighed. "Over the past few months, I've had this same pain at work. But then, I go home and it's like, I can breathe." "So what? You can breathe here," Cheyenne said, her voice filled with bitterness. No, I can't. I can't." and I won't. I'm not going to put myself through one more minute of suffering than is absolutely necessary, Anthony said. I will fight for a divorce, Cheyenne now screamed. Do you hear that? I'll fight for this as long as it takes. When Carter Fullov informed Cheyenne's attorney that all additional expenses would be paid by Cheyenne Whitehead, the attorney contacted Cheyenne and relayed this information to her. Oh, so now you're using Dad's money against me, Cheyenne said sarcastically into the phone. Now you have money. Should I do whatever you say? Yes, said Anthony, making no attempt to respond to her attack. I hope you rot in hell, Anthony Whitehead, Cheyenne spat. Hear that? I hope you rot in hell. Been there. I'm getting ready to get out, but thanks for the good wishes, Anthony jokes. I'll hang up now. Anthony knew when Cheyenne received the final divorce decree. Courtney Louviere contacted him to let him know that Cheyenne Whitehead was on the third line. Before Anthony could even say hi, Cheyenne was already sobbing into the phone. Arriving home after another grueling day, Anthony pulled out a rather thick envelope with the official seal of the St. Anne County Court. The letter lay on the kitchen table, and he did not open it for several long minutes. Anthony wishes he had something stronger than beer at home. He even got into his Ferrari with the intention of driving to the nearest store in Pin Oak, Louisiana, the only place other than the club where he could buy a bottle of St. Elizabeth's Superior. Instead, he ended up at Arthur Porter's gym. He hit the heavy bag until he could raise his arms. Then he stood under the hot shower, listlessly rubbing his body with soap. Home again, with damp hair and smelling of cheap soap, Anthony looked at the countertop. The envelope was still there. 14, almost 15 years of marriage are over. There were no whistles or applause, only screams and tears, and then dead silence, broken only by the rustle of thick papers in his hands. Anthony allowed a tear to roll down his cheek as he read the cold, impersonal legal terms that declared that Anthony Marcus Whitehead and Cheyenne Allison Frick Whitehead were no longer legally married. They had no legal rights to each other. Lisa, his sister, quietly sympathized. Gracie, his niece, assured him that he would meet someone better. Susan was too well-mannered to say, "Thank God," when Anthony called her. She simply quietly assured him that it would be better this way. Jimmy, Cindy, and Barbara, his other siblings, wondered why he was calling them to tell them about the dissolution of his marriage. Damn, I thought you two got divorced a long time ago. What, 5 or 6 years ago? Cindy asked. At least once a day, during the work week, Anthony received a call from Cheyenne. Apparently, she couldn't or wouldn't accept the fact that they were actually divorced. Over time, the calls became less frequent. First every other day, then once a week, once a month, and then from time to time, suddenly. I found someone, Cheyenne said on Christmas Eve. Oh, well, good for you, Anthony said, looking at the bright red envelope his mother had just placed on his desk. Twice as good as you've ever been, Cheyenne quipped into the phone. Oh, I'm sure it is, said Anthony, now seeing the conversation for what it really was. Cheyenne was just trying to make him jealous. The problem is that Anthony didn't feel jealous. Yes, he has, Cheyenne began. Well, that's great, Cheyenne, Anthony said cheerfully. I hope sorry, you didn't say his name, but I hope you two have a very Merry Christmas, you know. Inside the bright red envelope was his Christmas bonus. Anthony whistled as he looked at the $250,000 amount on the check. Then he smiled and nodded. Under this envelope, there was another envelope. It was a postcard from Anne DeFranco, his former colleague. Although almost 2 years had passed, she still remembered to send him a postcard. The postcard showed a horse-faced woman and her 3 children, all sitting on horses. Anthony smiled at the genuine happiness they were radiating. Merry Christmas, Anne wrote. As you can see, we enjoyed the ranch so much that we saved up and went there again this year. Merry Christmas, Anthony said out loud, reading the little notes her 3 children had scribbled on the inside cover of the card. Before leaving his office, Anthony called Oakleaf Ranch and booked a 2-week cattle camp for Anne and her children. He then booked the same trip for Cheyenne and a guest. He was pretty sure Cheyenne wouldn't go, and if she did, she would take her mother with her, not some mysterious new lover. Mr. Whitehead, this bonus? Courtney asked, a worried look on her face. Yes, miss, Anthony smiled. Are you going to say that's too much? Mr. Whitehead, this is too much, Courtney objected. Mr. Whitehead, I haven't been doing anything all day. Courtney, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, hug a tree during the day, whatever you're celebrating with. See you Monday, okay, Anthony said and left. The work floor was unusually quiet as his leather heels clicked on the concrete. In the corner, by the metal steps, stood a festively decorated Christmas tree. Underneath were 3 gifts. 2 of them looked slightly dented, as if they had been touched often. The 3rd gift looked almost untouched. Anthony saw his name on the tag and again refused to even pick up the colorfully wrapped gift. Yeah. No, I think I'll leave this one alone, Anthony chuckled mirthlessly. The day after Christmas, Anthony bought himself a Bentley. The shiny white car was as responsive as his Ferrari, but it felt like he was sitting on a cloud. Even the speed bumps in the Whitehead Generators parking lot were barely noticeable as he drove over them. Wow, that's a luxury feeling, Anthony said as he pulled into his parking spot. The new year was celebrated at the Hardington Acres Club. Anthony put a smile on his face as he interacted with family and acquaintances. The orchestra was quite good, and he even danced a few times with Gracie, his favorite niece, with Lisa and Cindy and Barbara, and with Cindy's daughters, Penny and Stacy. Honestly, if he could avoid dancing with those 2 nieces, he would. Penny and Stacy were spitting images of Cindy Whitehead, their mother, narcissistic, spoiled princesses. At midnight, he stood with his mother and family, counted down the time, and then shouted, Happy New Year, along with everyone else. He looked around, but didn't see Gracie. This was not unusual. The girl usually avoided crowds. Happy New Year, Anthony said when he found Gracie standing on the back porch, her nose pressed against the cold glass as she watched the impressive fireworks display. The beautiful young woman looked away from the fireworks and smiled. He let her come to him, let her hug him, and give him a quick kiss on the cheek. Happy New Year, Uncle Anthony, Gracie agreed. Getting ready to go. Are you okay? Asked Anthony. Yeah, Gracie agreed. Happy New Year, Anthony said again, standing at the door that led to the magnificent ballroom. This year will be better, Uncle Anthony, Gracie whispered quietly with hope. Now, 364 days later, Anthony Whitehead thought nothing of his niece's empty words. Anthony only felt fatigue creeping into his body. I need a vacation, Anthony realized. I sit at my desk every damn day and approve vacations for everyone else. I need my vacation. Sitting at his desk, staring blankly at the numbers, the quotas, Anthony couldn't think of any vacation plans. The ranch was not an option for him. He didn't like horses. To him, the horse smelled bad. The thought of fishing in a mountain stream reminded him of mosquitoes. It also made him think of cold water, which was not at all attractive. The same applied to alpine skiing. Skis meant snow, and snow meant cold. The French Quarter made Anthony think of crowds, pushing, pulling, sweaty people rubbing against each other. Cruises didn't appeal to him either. Anthony's mother went on cruises. He didn't know why. All Susan Whitehead could talk about was buffets, and how much weight she needed to lose after supposedly gaining 20 mythical pounds on her last cruise. Amusement parks were hot, sweaty, sticky. Immediately after the tragedy, Anthony and Cheyenne took Gracie and Lisa to Disneyland in Florida. 6 days of a nearly catatonic child and a crying mother was as horrific an experience as any other ordeal Anthony had ever endured. Every moment his heart broke over and over again for this sweet, scared child. And after the ordeal ended mercifully, Gracie hugged his knees and whispered, "Thank you, Uncle Anthony." That one hug made every miserable, sweaty, uncomfortable moment worth it. For that one hug on the knees, Anthony would happily relive it all again. But his niece was no longer that little child. "Thank you, Father," Anthony said privately in the quiet office. Thanks for the whole damn bunch, you sneaky scoundrel. At 3:46 minutes, Brent knocked on the door and announced that the last time sheets were ready. Thank you, Mr. Collier, Anthony said, not looking up from the table with shipping rates. Anthony collected timesheets, entered each employee's hours, adding 2 hours each to bring it up to a full 40 hours for the week. He double-checked each report card and then signed each one as Anthony M. Whitehead before turning everything off. Walking through the semi-darkness of the workshop, Anthony looked around again. The Christmas tree was twinkling and blinking, looking rather sad in the corner. There were 2 gifts underneath. One gift was for an employee who was on vacation. The other was addressed to Anthony W. And again was from. And again Anthony refused to even pick up the colorfully wrapped gift. Anthony entered the code for the alarm. With one last look at the building, Anthony walked out into the cold December wind. Arthur Porter's son, Jake Porter, was on duty and nodded in greeting as Anthony entered the gym. Anthony beat the heavy bag, then tried his hand at the speed bag. "We need to do this faster," the young man said mockingly. Anthony ignored the young man and continued hitting the leather bag. Slowly, methodically, he increased his speed. He will never be as fast as the young man. His bag will never make the sound rata-tata-tata, but he got a good rhythm. Arriving at the club, Anthony smiled as his niece's green Mustang pulled up right behind him. They drove up slowly, and finally Anthony braced himself for the cold. "Happy New Year, sir," the parking attendant said cheerfully, handing Anthony a receipt. His niece Gracie got out from the passenger side, and Anthony smiled warmly. His eyebrow raised slightly as an attractive brunette stepped out of the driver's side. He was introduced by Nancy Hebert, Gracie's friend, and before he could stop the words, Anthony asked what they meant by girlfriend. "We're in this together," Nancy said without hesitation. In the club lobby, Anthony watched as Gracie's friend helped her. He saw the beautiful girl unbutton Gracie's coat, take their coats to the closet, and then take Gracie's hand. "Thank you, God," said Anthony. "Someone to take care of her." The young girl at the wardrobe reception gave Anthony a beautiful smile. Her big brown eyes smiled at him. Her plump lips stretched to reveal one slightly crooked tooth as she wished him a happy new year. Inside the ballroom, Anthony saw his mother talking with Joanna and Barney Siegel. He didn't see their annoying daughter, Barbara, and walked over to the trio. As if she felt she had been missed, Barbara walked up to the trio right in front of Anthony. "Mom, where's your walker?" Anthony jokes. "Anthony Marcus Whitehead," Susan screamed. "Hi, Anthony," Barbara Siegel flirted. "Oh, hi, Betty, right?" said Anthony. Susan told Anthony that Cheyenne was here, and in fact, she was heading towards them. She also noted that she herself had no idea what Anthony had ever seen in this impudent woman. "Saw a lot of myself in her," Anthony said jokingly. "Incorrigible," Susan declared as she left. "Hey, Anthony," Cheyenne grinned, bending over so her large breasts and rose tattoo were clearly visible. "Hi, Cheyenne," Anthony said. "So, where is he? Oh shit, what's his name?" "Roland," Cheyenne suggested. Clearly drunk, Cheyenne slurred her words and staggered on her 5-inch heels. And even though Cheyenne was bragging about her 24-year-old boyfriend, Anthony could feel her unhappiness coming off her in waves. He felt depressed talking to her. He felt no jealousy towards Cheyenne or Roland, her young lover. Anthony felt sorry for her, and he felt some responsibility for her misfortune. "Well, Happy New Year," Anthony said as Roland Verdot approached them. The young man's face was gloomy. His unsteady gait told Anthony that Cheyenne wasn't the only one who got too carried away with the champagne that evening. "Roland, how are you?" Anthony put a smile on his face and extended his hand. "Cheyenne was just telling me how happy you two are together." "Oh yeah," Roland said, putting his arm around Cheyenne's waist. The gesture nearly dropped them both to the ground. Anthony supported Roland, preventing a minor embarrassment for the couple. "Oh yes," she said, "you're twice as good as me, so what? What can I say, huh?" Anthony said good-naturedly, You know, I could never make Cheyenne happy, so what if you can? Just go ahead. More power to you. The group was a quintet with an emaciated female vocalist. They were good and performed a variety of dance songs. Anthony danced with his nieces Penny and Stacy, his sisters Cindy, Barbara, and Lisa, and his mother. However, Gracie seemed happy to be dancing on the dance floor with her friend. For several dances, Anthony simply stood and watched the two young women smiling at each other as they swayed to the music. His younger brother, Jimmy Whitehead, approached Lisa. Jimmy demanded a conversation with Gracie and an opportunity to make amends in his relationship with her. There was a row, and an angry Lisa hit Jimmy, knocking him to the ground. Before Anthony could intervene, Susan Whitehead quietly but firmly ordered Jimmy to leave. Anthony sat at the table, shaking his head. Gracie, deeply upset, allowed herself to be led to the table by Nancy. Anthony's heart almost broke when he saw how the girl consoled and cared for his niece. Again, he silently thanked God that Nancy Hebert was in Gracie's life. After 2 glasses of water, Nancy pulled Gracie back onto the dance floor. Anthony and Lisa exchanged smiles as they watched the two young women dance. "Come on, Mom, let's dance," Anthony demanded, taking Susan's hand. Although he had not planned it, Anthony was one of the last to leave the ballroom. He hadn't seen Roland or Cheyenne since their last meeting and assumed they had either been placed in a secluded corner to pass out or had been discreetly asked to leave. Anthony still wondered why Cheyenne continued to be a member of the club. She always despised the club when they were married. He also wondered how she paid for her membership. The girl's smile at the wardrobe reception was closed, forced. The smile didn't reach her big brown eyes. And when Anthony asked what happened, the story poured out. Her boyfriend took her car while she was at work. She had to finish her shift soon, but the guy wasn't answering her calls or texts. Anthony invited the girl to use his phone, suggesting that this guy was ignoring his girlfriend's calls. The assumption turned out to be correct. Trey Edmonton answered the third call. Using his best ghetto voice, Anthony informed Trey Edmonton that he and his team would get the girl home safe. The wardrobe girl's eyes widened in surprise when Anthony broke the connection. Anthony smiled as his phone started ringing. He sent the call to voicemail, telling the girl that her boyfriend seemed to be quite drunk. When her own phone started ringing, Anthony offered to take her home. The trip from the club to the girl's apartment took 24 minutes. During the trip, Anthony learned that Nessie, that was the girl's name, lived with her mother, stepfather, and 2 stepsisters in a 2-room apartment. Nessie was short for Vanessa. In her cheap jacket and branded polo shirt and polyester trousers, hugging her attractive buttocks, Anthony decided that Nessie was not Nessie. She was Vanessa. At her apartment, Vanessa demanded Anthony's phone number. She entered her number into his phone, which greatly amused Anthony. As she gently released his lips, Vanessa gave a soft bite to his bottom lip with her teeth. On his way home, Anthony passed a compact car that was stopped by a St. Anne Parish police car. A sullen young man sat in the back of the cruiser, and Anthony wondered if this was Nessie's ex-boyfriend. Apparently, this was Vanessa Bro's ex-boyfriend, as she now spoke of him. Anthony didn't weaken until he pulled into his garage. He was still very excited as he brushed his teeth. At 11 minutes past 12 the next morning, Anthony's phone rang. He saw Vanessa's name and briefly considered setting the girl's ringtone to Brown-Eyed Girl by Van Morrison. "Hello," she greeted cheerfully when he answered. "Hello," Anthony answered. "Hey, me, listen, you, what are you doing for dinner? My mom makes New Year's stuff. You know, ham, black-eyed peas, and cabbage. No, it's not that nasty cabbage. My mom really makes the best cabbage. She fries it with a pound of bacon. It's so delicious, and applesauce. Will you come?" Vanessa quickly said. Vanessa, do you know how old I am?" asked Anthony. "No, not really," Vanessa replied. "Honey, I'll be 42 on February 27th, Anthony admitted. "Oh, so what, 42-year-olds don't eat?" Vanessa asked. We eat. We eat more than we should most of the time," Anthony laughed. Okay, then. Lunch will be at once, okay? Vanessa said. Anthony shrugged. He had no plans for lunch, and cabbage cooked with a pound of bacon sounded delicious. He decided that he would go, have lunch, thank Vanessa and Vanessa's mother for their hospitality, and leave. Burns and Burns' grocery store was open. The list on his phone listed wines that would go with a ham, and Anthony scanned the shelves, looking for any of the wines mentioned. He found one and took it. Turning around, he also found St. Beer, Elizabeth Lager, and bought a six-pack of this beer. Rounding the corner, going in the wrong direction, Anthony came face to face with the baker as the woman was putting hot loaves of French bread on the counter. Perfect timing, Anthony exclaimed, causing the curvaceous woman to laugh. And walking down the aisle next to the wine bar, Anthony saw neatly arranged bouquets of fresh flowers. Do grocery stores sell flowers? Anthony asked out loud. For Valentine's Day, you won't find a better deal, a young store employee assured Anthony. Those flower shops, they'll charge you $20-30. It's $14.99 here. Yeah, said Anthony. He carried beer, wine, and bread to the open cash register. Then he returned to the flower aisle and took two bouquets, already in vases. One was a mixture of different flowers, and the other was a collection of white roses. Ready? The exhausted woman smiled when Anthony returned with two vases. I think so, Anthony agreed. Oh, they're beautiful. Two. Will anyone be jealous? The woman asked, carefully scanning the vases. There might even be a shooting, Anthony said. Remember, keep your head down, the woman chuckled. Yeah, where were you when I was getting divorced? Anthony asked, and the woman laughed. In the car, Anthony made sure to cut the price tags off the bouquets. He then placed two vases on the floor of the front seat of his Ferrari and drove into the apartment complex. Hello, Vanessa exclaimed joyfully, opening the apartment door. Hi, Anthony said, handing her a vase of white roses. This is for you. Vanessa Bro was almost an exact copy of Natalie Arnault, her mother. The same blondes, the same brown eyes, the same big breasts, the same round buttocks, and the same smile. Natalie's handshake was warm as she greeted Anthony. Then she scolded Anthony for bringing wine and beer and bread. And look what he brought me, yes, Vanessa boasted, showing her mother a vase of roses. Man, wow, they're beautiful, yeah, Natalie said, actually reaching out to gently touch one of the rose petals. I'll be right back, Anthony said. Oh, you shouldn't have done that, Natalie countered when Anthony returned a moment later with another vase of flowers. Are you feeding me? Oh yeah, I should have done that, Anthony replied. Clarissa, Bunny, this is Tony. Vanessa introduced Anthony to the two rather plump girls. Anthony smiled. No, I'll call you Tony. Vanessa smiled and kissed him. Bunny, go tell Daddy that dinner is almost ready, Natalie ordered the younger girl. Yes, Mom, Bunny said and ran down the corridor. Anthony was sure that the neighbors below Arno's apartment didn't like it when Bunny ran around. The sound was quite loud. Hi, I'm Frank. How are you? Frank said, trying to push Vanessa away to get to Bunny. Anthony Whitehead. Anthony smiled as Frank grabbed the girl's chubby hand. Dad, don't, Bunny screamed as her father picked her up. What did I tell you, huh? Frank said, giving the girl two slaps on her plump buttocks and then a loud kiss on the cheek. Hi, Anthony. How are you? Frank said, holding out a meaty hand. Me? Okay, what about you? How are you? Anthony said, shaking the man's hand. Lunch was a celebration. He was loud, cheerful, energetic. The wine was shared among all six of us. Even Bunny and Clarissa tried a glass each, grimacing at the taste and quickly rinsing their mouths with sweet tea. And now a beer. Hey, Nessie, you should bring him here more often, you hear? Frank said when Natalie mentioned St. Elizabeth Lager, which Anthony brought along with the wine and bread. Okay, Vanessa agreed. Oh, and we'll have banana pudding. Anthony, do you like banana pudding? Natalie asked. Damn it, who doesn't like banana pudding? Anthony agreed. Over banana pudding and coffee, Anthony was told about Vanessa's early days. He was even shown photographs of a cute child. He also learned about Frank's ex-wife, Bunny, and Clarissa's mother, who just went off and left them. Coming home, oh, damn, I'm almost tired. Yeah, been on my feet all day, Frank said. What are you doing? Asked Anthony. Mr. Tony, my dad is a mailman. Yes, Bunny said proudly. Tony? Thought you said it was Anthony? Natalie asked. Looks like Vanessa decided it would be Tony, Anthony smiled. His smile widened as Vanessa squeezed his hand. She laid her head on his shoulder. Anyway, when I get home, this little one says, "Oh, Daddy, I'm going to starve," right? And this one, God, when was the last time this diaper was changed, huh? Frank continued his story. I'm right next door, man. Those apartments were small, huh? Natalie smiled, remembering. Yes, they were, Frank agreed. And this one is getting smaller, yes. What do you mean? Vanessa asked, lifting her head from Anthony's shoulder. So you're about to have another little brother or sister, about 5 or 6 months old by the looks of it, Frank boasted. No, Vanessa exclaimed, then screamed. Somehow dinner moved from the small dining room to the living room. Anthony was wedged in the corner of the small sofa with Vanessa cuddled up to him. When Anthony admitted that he was the coup of Whitehead Generators, Frank's only comment was that he knew where it was. But it's not on my route. I think it's Sharon who services this whole block, Frank mused. For some reason, Anthony felt he had to reduce his importance, should be more like this family. So he told them about his work for the St. Anne Parish before his father's death. Civil engineering? Yeah, remember you, Frank said, then looked at Anthony. But dude, were you sick or something? Damn, you lost a ton of weight, huh? When Anthony finally said goodbye, Vanessa clung to him. When he took his long coat off the hook, Vanessa put her coat on, too. Where are we going? Asked Anthony. I was going to ask you about that. She smiled and grabbed his hand. You know what? I haven't been to a movie. I don't remember when, Anthony decided. Standing outside the Joy 4 movie theater in Elgin, Louisiana, Anthony and Vanessa huddled together, trying to get shelter from the harsh wind blowing off the Atchafalaya. Apparently, they weren't the only ones who decided to go to the movies. In front of them stood a line of almost 40 people wanting to buy tickets. And in the 3 people in front of them, Anthony saw a familiar blonde. Dark hair roots were visible. But the young man Cheyenne Whitehead was clinging to was not Roland. Oblivious to those around them, the two kissed and shamelessly groped each other. At first, Anthony was outraged by his ex-wife's behavior. Then a sober thought came over him. Quite often during their marriage, Cheyenne would say she was going somewhere, but then end up not where she said she would be. Other times she was unavailable at all and didn't say where she was. What did Cheyenne do when he couldn't find her? She always had plausible excuses for these periods of time. Or she reacted very defensively. You don't own me was her favorite defense. But now, as he observed his ex-wife's behavior, Anthony wondered if this behavior had been the norm while they were married. Oh, Vanessa shuddered as a gust of icy wind swept across the asphalt parking lot. Anthony smiled and pulled the girl towards him, kissing Vanessa on the nose. Someone standing between Anthony and Cheyenne apparently said something to the loving couple. Cheyenne turned to answer. As she did so, she saw Anthony and her arrogant expression turned into fear. Anthony smiled and nodded in recognition. Cheyenne's face changed again, taking on a mocking expression. Is this one of Gracie's little friends? Cheyenne said mockingly, pointing her red fingernail at Vanessa. HM? No, this is my girlfriend Vanessa Bro, Anthony smiled. Vanessa, this is Cheyenne Whitehead, my ex-wife. And excuse me, young man, I don't know your name. This is Tim, the young man stammered. Hi, Tim, Anthony Whitehead, Anthony said cheerfully. So, where is Roland? Too drunk, Cheyenne said, turning away from Anthony and Vanessa. The line moved slowly. Right before they reached the window, Anthony asked Vanessa what movie they were going to watch. She seemed surprised that she was allowed to choose. Inside, Anthony stood behind Cheyenne and Tim in the snack line again. Tony, I can take. Vanessa began, looking around at the illuminated menu. Honey, you can take whatever you want, Anthony smiled. So Tony, Cheyenne screamed, eyes wide in surprise as she turned to face them. The line is moving, Anthony smiled, nodding his head. You almost hit me that time I called you Tony, Cheyenne said.
Yeah, I don't remember that, Anthony said, shrugging.
But maybe I didn't care about you as much as I care about Vanessa back then, huh? You, Tony, Vanessa exclaimed, hugging Anthony tightly. Don't worry, baby, Cheyenne told Vanessa mockingly. Once the glitter wears off, he'll throw you away like toilet paper. Only if it acts like toilet paper, Anthony said. The line is moving. Maybe you should come over. Why don't you go to hell? Cheyenne said angrily. After the movie, Anthony reluctantly told Vanessa that the next day was a work day and he needed to catch up. Her kisses at the door of her apartment were soft, full of sweet promises. From Vanessa's apartment complex, Anthony drove home to his mother. Luckily, she had already prepared coffee. Sitting at the kitchen bar, Anthony told Susan about meeting Cheyenne at the Joy 4 movie theater. Was Susan's only response. And so I'm standing there thinking, did she cheat on me? How is she doing it now with Roland? Anthony said. I think it's all water under the bridge now, but no. Well, at least for the first 2 years after your wedding, Susan revealed. What? How do you know that? Asked Anthony. Susan pushed her coffee cup towards him and then moved away from the counter. Anthony poured himself more coffee and topped it up for his mother. He made sure to turn off the coffee maker. Do you need to make some more coffee? Susan asked, returning to the kitchen with a plastic folder. No, Mom. Plus, I thought caffeine was bad for you old people. You know, urinary tract infections and all that, Anthony jokes. Anthony Marcus Whitehead, Susan screamed, slamming him with a plastic folder. I just don't know what I ever did to deserve a child like you. The plastic folder was from a private investigator named Reynolds. Marcus Whitehead, Anthony's father, paid Reynolds to spy on one Cheyenne Allison Frick Whitehead. The surveillance continued for 27 months before Marcus stopped it. She was a drinker who seemed to be addicted to spending your money on frivolous things, but no, she didn't cheat on you, Susan concluded. Oh, trust me, if she cheated, we'd be more than happy to let you know. In fact, had to talk your dad into not calling the police because of her lifestyle. How did you do that? Anthony asked, flipping through the report. The 70s were pretty turbulent, Susan said. And Dad agreed with this? Anthony asked, closing the folder. Your father loved you, Anthony. It may not have looked like it, but he loved you, Susan said. Are you sure you don't want more coffee? The next morning, Anthony did a grueling workout at Arthur Porter's gym. Then, after a quick massage from Randy, the massage therapist, and a quick shower, Anthony was ready for the first day of work of the new year. As he pulled up to Whitehead Generators, Anthony nodded in satisfaction. The employee parking lot was nearly full, which meant only a few people called in sick on this first day of work. Gathering his courage, Anthony opened the door of his Bentley and stepped out into the frosty January wind. Mr. Kazane Collier, to my office, Anthony said as he walked through the workshop to the metal steps leading to the offices. Yes, sir, Brent Collier said, grinning, using his intonation that sounded more like, your ass, sir. Oh no, don't sit down, Anthony said as Brent was about to sit down in one of the chairs in front of the table. It does not take a lot of time. Yes, sir, Brent asked in his strange intonation, grinning again at Anthony Whitehead. Mr. Collier, there will be some changes this year, Anthony began, and Brent tried to sit up again. And the first thing on the agenda is your dismissal. Dismissal, Brent asked, his eyes widening in surprise. Dismissed. I will no longer tolerate your grin, your disdain, and your outright insubordination, Anthony smiled widely. So, Mr. French here will escort you to your locker and then escort you off-site. You can't be serious, Brent said, stuttering. Oh, your ass, sir. I'm serious. Anthony smiled. I'm deadly serious. Thank you, that's all. But your dad promised me. Brent began. Oh, I looked at your employment record. There was no mention of that promise. If you can produce one letter, email, or note from my father promising you that you can't be fired, then I'll reconsider. No, that's it. Thank you, said Anthony, already moving on to more pressing matters. Good luck with the plan, Brent said sarcastically. These guys, they're loyal to me, you hear? These guys are loyal to their paychecks, loyal to their families, Mr. Turdido Collier. Now please leave my office, Anthony said. Morning Tony appeared on his cell phone screen and Anthony smiled. Good morning, Anthony replied. Are you bored? Vanessa asked. Anthony thought about her question and his smile widened. In the cinema, her kisses were sensual. That first kiss at the beginning of the new year, when he dropped her off at her apartment, was no accident. Her kisses in the darkened cinema were sensual. Her kisses were full of promise. Her kisses were amazing. She made him buy a huge buttered popcorn and a box of snow caps. Then she mixed popcorn and chocolates. Her kisses taste like butter, salt, sugar, chocolate. Vanessa's hot mouth on Tony's neck made him tremble. Her fingers near his zipper made him look around nervously. Yes, I miss you, he replied. Good morning, Mr. Whitehead. How was your new year? Asked Courtney Louviere. Incredible, just incredible, Anthony said, looking at his phone. And yours? I what? Courtney asked, shocked by Mr. Whitehead's vulgarity. Anthony looked at Vanessa's slender neck and wondered what a diamond necklace would look like on her. I have one thing to do, Anthony suddenly decided, grabbing his coat. Anthony asked Vanessa if she was working that day, and she replied that she had a shift from 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She was desperately trying to arrange a ride with one of her colleagues. Her car was impounded when her ex-boyfriend was pulled over for drunk driving. I'll take you, Anthony wrote. Hooray, Vanessa replied with a row of smiling faces with kisses. At 11 o'clock, Bunny opened the apartment door and greeted Mr. Tony with a hug. Clarissa also greeted Mr. Tony with a hug, as did Natalie. Vanessa greeted Tony with a hug and a kiss. Tony then had to hug everyone goodbye before they could leave the small, neat, warm apartment. They went to Dusty's Country Kitchen for lunch and then went to Hardington Acres Country Club. Vanessa smiled as she leaned in to kiss Anthony. You sent me this photo, and I was like, you know what this neck needs. Anthony began stuttering as he dug into his coat pocket. My neck, Vanessa laughed. Were you really looking at my neck? So, I bought you this, Anthony said, pulling out a thin box. Oh, Vanessa was amazed, looking at the thick gold necklace with 3 diamonds in the center. Tony, this is real, right? Vanessa asked, looking at him instead of the decoration. Of course it's real, Anthony laughed. What, do you think I would risk dyeing your neck green? Okay, so what does that mean? Vanessa asked, pointing to the decoration. It means you, Vanessa. It means I like you. It means I'm glad we met. It probably means I'm probably your boyfriend, Anthony said, stuttering. You're already my boyfriend, Vanessa said. She blushed slightly and added more quietly. I don't do what we did in the movies with just anyone, you know. Give me a kiss, Anthony demanded. You'll be late. Oh, Vanessa screamed, struggling with the door. What time do you finish? Anthony shouted before she slammed the door. I'll write to you, Vanessa promised. Anthony returned to work. Physically, he returned to work. Mentally, he was in a dark cinema with beauty. In his mind, he was in a luxury Bentley car, where a beautiful girl was giving him sweet, sensual kisses. The Department of Labor is on line 3, Courtney told him. Anthony processed the request and saw line 2 blinking. When he ended the call, Courtney told him there were 2 Cheyennes on the line. I don't think you're going to tell Roland about, my friendship with Tim, okay? Cheyenne threatened. Cheyenne, why would I want to interfere with his misfortune? Anthony asked cheerfully. Poor guy stuck with a lying, cheating bastard. Why would I want to ruin that for him? Before Cheyenne could answer, Anthony hung up. At 5:30, Courtney wished him a good evening. At 6:30, Anthony walked through the darkened, quiet factory. He considered the possibility of adding a second shift. Every moment of plant downtime costs them money. The insurance was the same whether the plant was busy or not. Increased cleaning and maintenance would be minimal. Labor costs would increase slightly, but the increase in productivity would offset this. At 9:50, his phone beeped. A message from Vanessa informed him that she would finish in 10 minutes. Anthony pulled on his tennis shoes and grabbed his coat before running outside. "Hello," Vanessa said, opening the car door before Anthony could get out to open it for her. "Hey, you need this Saturday off," Anthony said. "I think I'm free. It seems like Friday is my last day at work," Vanessa said with some sadness. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry to hear that." Anthony tried to sound sincere. On Saturday, at his niece Gracie's birthday party, Vanessa called him Tony. 7 of the 8 other women at the event even screamed in surprise. "Nobody calls me Tony," Anthony smiled, kissing the tip of Vanessa's nose. "I call it," she laughed, then made him recoil as she licked the tip of his nose. As they got into his Bentley, which Vanessa stated she preferred over another car, Vanessa again played with the thick gold necklace around her neck. Then she looked at him with her big, warm, beautiful brown eyes and quietly asked him to take her to his home. Her big eyes were full of fear as she looked at him. She moved to shield her body from his gaze. She was self-conscious, convinced that her body was somehow fat or imperfect. "Vanessa, you're beautiful," Anthony breathed, crawling onto the bed next to her. The only thing she was wearing, besides the horrified expression on her face, was his thick gold necklace. To calm her anxiety, Anthony turned off the desk lamp. Now the light in the room came from the bay window. The pale winter light showed Anthony that the worry had not left her face, even as its shadow fell across her features. "Beautiful," Anthony repeated and kissed her softly. "I love you," Vanessa said in his ear. "Do you hear that, Tony? I love you." "Love you too," Anthony said. At the end of the month, they held their first board meeting to start the new year. Susan, the acting chief executive officer, and Lisa, the chief financial officer, wanted to conduct a study on the feasibility of adding a second shift to production. Anthony felt angry. Why study? But he was outvoted, even though he had Cindy and Barbara's votes by proxy. Susan, Lisa, Jimmy, and Lisa as Gracie's proxy voted to wait until the study was done. After the meeting ended, only Susan and Anthony remained in the boardroom. Susan pulled a cuff folder from her bag and smiled, pushing it toward Anthony. "Vanessa Anbra's file," she said. Did you investigate her?" Anthony asked, feeling his anger rising. "Mom, this is incredible." "Of course I investigated her, Anthony. Even you have to admit that your relationships with women are not the best. I also investigated Gracie's friend," Susan defended herself. "Oh, and in case you were wondering, Nancy is fine." "So if I tell you that Vanessa has a high school diploma, is it okay if I continue dating her?" Anthony asked sharply. "Please do, Tony," Susan said, the corners of her lips turning up slightly. "And son, if there's another woman, after Miss Bra, rest assured I'll investigate her too. The same goes for any girl Jimmy ever dates." Anthony pushed the file towards his mother and stood up. "Good night, Mom," Anthony said. "Wait, just wait until you have kids of your own, Anthony Marcus Whitehead," Susan said, putting the folder back in her bag. "Spring has replaced the frosty winter." In April, at his niece's wedding to her friend, Anthony was excited and felt honored when he was asked to walk Nancy down the white silk aisle. Walking past the smiling faces of relatives and friends, Anthony truly felt happy. After the ceremony, Jimmy approached Nancy and Gracie, told them he was proud of them, and wished them a long, happy life. Anthony saw tears of pain on his little brother's cheeks as he turned to leave. Vanessa squeezed Anthony's hand. She looked at him as he stepped into the passage. "Love you," Anthony said, hugging Jimmy. "I love." Jimmy tried to answer, but was too choked with tears. Call your mentor, the waiter said as Jimmy hurried out of the country club pavilion. On May 27, Natalie Arnault gave birth to Claire Marie Arnault. On June 1, Anthony gave Jimmy his final instructions, called him a fool, and stormed out the doors of Whitehead Generators. In the parking lot, he got behind the wheel of a rented motorhome and drove to the parking lot of the Spanish Armada Apartments. He didn't even have time to park the bulky vehicle before Vanessa was already running down the stairs with a suitcase in her hands. You can't tell me it's all your stuff, and all of Clarissa's stuff, and all of Bunny's stuff, Anthony said. You're crazy too, Vanessa smiled. This is my suitcase. Bunny and Clarissa's suitcases are still upstairs. You're not bad yourself, Anthony laughed. Well, let's go see your beautiful little sister. They went upstairs together. Natalie proudly showed the still somewhat wrinkled and bruised baby. The trip was a surprise for Bunny and Clarissa. The girls rushed out of the school building, happily surprised to see their big sister and Mr. Tony waiting for them at the entrance to the school parking lot. Nessie, Mr. Tony, what are you doing here? Bunny asked, hugging them. Come to see if there are any little girls who would like to go to Disneyland, asked Mr. Tony. Are we going to Disneyland? Bunny screamed. Mr. Tony, you're not kidding, are you? Clarissa asked, hardly believing her ears. A week later, 4 burned, but happy people were back on I-10, heading west. Bunny leaned on Mr. Tony, then kissed him on the cheek. Mr. Tony, she said. Anthony replied, turning on his turn signal to change lanes. Mr. Tony, you need to marry Nessie, said Bunny. Oh, why is that? Bunny Francis Teresa Arnott, asked Anthony. Who told him my name? Bunny screamed to Clarice and Vanessa, who were relaxing on a bed in the back of the caravan. Not me, Clarissa denied. No, Vanessa responded. Mum or Dad must have said it. Mr. Tony, who told you my name? Bunny insisted. Santa Claus, Anthony suggested, not wanting to tell the 7-year-old that his mother had provided a file on her older sister that included Bunny's real name. But tell me, why should I marry Nessie? Because she loves you, Bunny said. I love you too. Well, that's a really good reason, Anthony nodded. So, will you do it? Asked Bunny. Maybe, Anthony replied, looking in the side mirror. Come on, boy, get away from me, okay? When they pulled up to the apartment, Anthony was just glad to get out of the driver's seat. Bunny and Clarissa were annoyed when Anthony woke them up. This irritation increased when their father pretended he didn't even know they had been away for a week. Girls, Natalie smiled. Your dad is teasing you. We missed you terribly. Mr. Tony received 3 sleepy hugs and 1 sleepy kiss. Anthony walked down the stairs, his back starting to ache at the thought of having to get back into that big car to take him back to the rental. Upon returning home, Anthony entered his house and realized that he felt lonely. Mom, I'm home, he said when Susan answered the phone. Oh, you were leaving? Susan joked. Yeah. Oh, sorry, is dementia starting yet? Asked Anthony. Anthony, I hope when you have children, you have a child who looks like you, do you hear? Susan snorted. Love you, Mom, Anthony laughed. Thank God, Jimmy said when Anthony told him he was back home. I swear to God, I don't know how you can stand it day after day. I'm going crazy. Assuming you ever had intelligence, Anthony replied. During their week-long stay, Anthony and Vanessa slept together in a fairly large bed. But since Bunny and Clarissa were within touching distance, they did nothing but hug and kiss. As he stretched out in his bed, his very comfortable bed, Anthony missed Vanessa's scent as it filled his nostrils. He missed the feeling of her warm skin under his palm. In the morning, it was Bunny who opened the door to their apartment. She smiled and hugged Mr. Tony. Nessie? Yes, she's still sleeping, said Bunny. Tony, what are you doing here? Vanessa asked, her hair disheveled, her face still swollen and covered in sunburned spots. I've been thinking about all sorts of romantic ways to do this, but I just can't wait, Anthony said and got down on one knee in the apartment's small hallway. Vanessa, will you marry me? Looking at the smiling faces of his friends and family, Anthony Marcus Whitehead felt truly lucky. The music grew louder and Anthony turned to watch Vanessa and Frank step onto the white silk carpet. His heart sank in his throat when he saw his bride in her elegant wedding dress. The wedding dress was actually his mother's wedding dress when she married Marcus Anthony Whitehead nearly 5 decades ago. So, I take it you approve of her? Anthony asked Susan when she suggested Vanessa wear the dress. Of course, said Susan. And you? I'm not so sure. Remember, Mom, in a couple of years, you will finally grow old. I will be your guardian, Anthony warned. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.